The CIA has been tracking Bigfoot for over 14 years, and I should know, I was part of the team doing it. What started as a joke assignment in 1980 turned into one of the most classified operations in agency history, and what we discovered about these creatures changed everything we thought we knew about national security. My name is Derek Shepard. I'm 36 years old, and this is the story I was never supposed to tell. But in 1994, after leaving the agency, I've decided the American people deserve to know the truth. March 15, 1994. I sat in a small coffee shop in Georgetown, Washington, D.C., watching the rain streak down the windows. The cafe was called Murphy's, a place that had been around since the 1950s, with red vinyl booths and a jukebox that still played Patsy Cline. I'd chosen it specifically because it was loud, crowded, and the kind of place where nobody paid attention to anyone else's conversations. Across from me sat Richard Morrison, an investigative journalist for the Washington Post. He was 42, balding, wearing a wrinkled suit that had seen better days. His tape recorder sat on the table between us, red light blinking. "Let me make sure I understand you correctly," Morrison said, leaning forward. "You're telling me that the Central Intelligence Agency has been running an operation to track and monitor Bigfoot since 1980. "That's exactly what I'm telling you," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. My hands were steady, but my heart was racing. What I was about to do could land me in prison. The secrets I'd sworn to keep, the classified information I was about to reveal. It was all a violation of my security clearance and the agreements I'd signed when I joined the agency in 1982. But I didn't care anymore. Some truths were too important to stay buried. "Why?" Morrison asked. "Why would the CIA care about a cryptid that most people think is a hoax?" "Because it's not a hoax," I said simply. "Bigfoot is real. Multiple populations exist throughout North America, primarily in the Pacific Northwest, but also in pockets of the Appalachians, northern Minnesota, and parts of Canada. And the government has known about them since at least the late 1970s. Morrison's pen was moving rapidly across his notepad, even though the tape recorder was running. How did this start? How did the CIA get involved? I took a breath, organizing my thoughts. This story had been locked inside me for 12 years, and now that I was finally telling it, I wanted to get it right. It started in 1979, I began. A Forest Service ranger in Washington state reported an incident involving an unknown primate stealing food from campsites. The reports were consistent, detailed, and the ranger was credible, former military, not prone to wild stories. Local authorities couldn't explain it, so they flagged it up the chain. And it reached the CIA? Eventually. First, it went to the Department of Interior, then to the NSA when they detected unusual heat signatures in the area during a satellite pass. Large bipedal heat signatures moving through zones where no humans should have been. The NSA kicked it to us because it was domestic territory and there were concerns it might be related to Soviet activity. Morrison raised an eyebrow. Soviet activity? This was 1979, remember. Cold War was still very much a thing. The initial theory was that the Soviets might be running reconnaissance in remote U.S. territories, testing our monitoring capabilities. So the CIA formed a small task force to investigate. They called it Project Silverback. And what did they find? I smiled grimly. Not Soviets, something much more interesting. In June of 1980, the task force had its first confirmed visual contact with a Bigfoot creature in the Olympic National Forest. 8 feet tall, covered in dark brown hair, bipedal locomotion, clearly not human, clearly not any known species of ape. Morrison was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "You're serious?" "Completely serious. The team included myself. I was fresh out of training, assigned as a junior field operative, along with 3 senior agents and a wildlife biologist from UC Berkeley who had security clearance. We tracked the creature for 3 days before we saw it. When we did, it changed everything. How so? Because it was intelligent, Morrison. Not animal intelligence, human-level intelligence. It knew we were tracking it. It left false trails, doubled back on its route, even created distractions to throw us off. This wasn't a dumb animal. This was something that understood tactics. I pulled out a file folder from my briefcase, copies of documents I'd made before leaving the agency. Classified materials that could get me charged with espionage if the government decided to press charges. These are incident reports from 1980 to 1985, I said, sliding the folder across to him. Documented sightings, tracking data, population estimates, all classified top secret. Morrison opened the folder, his eyes widening as he scanned the documents. These have classification stamps. Derek, if these are real, they're real. And I have more. Photographs, plaster casts of footprints, even hair samples that were analyzed. The DNA analysis alone would blow your mind. What did the DNA show? That's the really crazy part, I said. The samples showed a genetic profile that was close to human, but distinctly different, close enough to be in the Homo genus, but divergent enough to be a separate species or subspecies. The geneticists we consulted, all with clearances, theorized it might be a surviving population of Homo erectus, or a related species that we thought went extinct hundreds of thousands of years ago. Morrison set down his pen, his expression serious. Derek, you understand what you're claiming here. You're saying the government has proof that Bigfoot exists and has kept it secret for 14 years. Longer than that, probably, I corrected. I'm telling you what I know from my involvement starting in 1980. But there are hints in the classified files that the government has known about these creatures since at least the 1960s, maybe earlier. There are references to something called Operation Tall Timber from the 1950s that I never got clearance to see. Why keep it secret? Why not announce this discovery? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Think about it, Morrison. You announced that there's an unknown species of human-like primate living in American forests. What happens? Chaos, panic in rural communities, every yahoo with a gun trying to shoot one for the trophy, scientists demanding access, environmental groups demanding habitat protection, and that's before you get into the legal complications. Legal complications? If these creatures are intelligent, and they are, then what's their legal status? Are they animals, property? Do they have rights? If someone shoots one, is it hunting or murder? The government couldn't answer those questions without revealing the creatures exist in the first place. So they decided the safest option was to keep it classified and monitor the populations quietly. Morrison was writing furiously now. You said populations, plural. How many groups are we talking about? As of my last briefing in late 1993, we'd identified 17 distinct groups in the continental United States and southern Canada. Population estimates ranged from 200 to 300 individuals total, small scattered populations living in the most remote wilderness areas. And the CIA has been tracking all of them? Not just tracking, monitoring their movements, documenting their behavior, even intervening occasionally when they came too close to human populations. We had field teams deployed year-round in key areas. I spent most of 1983 to 1987 in the Pacific Northwest, doing nothing but Bigfoot surveillance. This is insane, Morrison muttered. How has this stayed secret? How many people know? Within the CIA, maybe 50 people total over the years. Most operations are compartmentalized. Field agents like me knew parts of the picture, but not everything. The full scope was known only to the division chief and his direct reports. Outside the CIA, there are probably another 100 people with knowledge, NSA analysts who monitor the satellite data, a few select scientists who've been consulted, high-level officials in the Forest Service and Department of Interior. And nobody's leaked this before now? The penalties for leaking classified information are severe, Morrison. Prison time, loss of pension, being branded a traitor. Plus, there's the credibility issue. Who's going to believe a story about the CIA tracking Bigfoot? It sounds like something out of a bad science fiction movie. Even with evidence, you'd be dismissed as a crazy conspiracy theorist. So why are you coming forward now? I was quiet for a moment, stirring my coffee, organizing my thoughts. This was the question I'd been asking myself for months, ever since I decided to reach out to Morrison. Because it's not right, I said finally. These creatures exist. They're living on American soil, and the public has a right to know. Moreover, their populations are declining. Habitat loss, climate change, human encroachment. They're being pushed into smaller and smaller territories. In another 20 years, they might be extinct. And when they're gone, the government will just classify the whole thing forever, and it'll be like they never existed. You're risking everything to tell this story, Morrison observed. I know. But I'm done lying. I'm done being a part of the cover-up. These creatures, they're intelligent beings trying to survive in a world that doesn't even acknowledge they exist. They deserve better than that. Morrison leaned back in his booth, studying me. You realize I'm going to need more than your word and some documents. I'll need corroboration, additional sources, verifiable evidence. I can give you that, I said. I have contact information for 2 other former operatives who worked on Project Silverback. They've agreed to speak with you off the record initially. I also have location data for where you can find evidence yourself, areas where the creatures are known to frequent, where you can find footprints, signs of their presence. This is going to be the biggest story of my career, Morrison said almost to himself. If it's true. It's true, I assured him. And Morrison, when you publish this, the government is going to deny everything. They'll call me a disgruntled former employee, claim the documents are fabricated, discredit the sources. You need to be prepared for that. I've dealt with government denials before. Not like this. This isn't some political scandal that'll blow over in a news cycle. This is challenging the fundamental understanding of what species exist on this continent. They'll fight this with everything they have. Morrison nodded slowly. Then we'd better make sure the story is airtight. Tell me everything, Derek. Start from the beginning. Morrison ordered another cup of coffee and settled in. Outside, the March rain continued to fall, creating a gray curtain that isolated us from the rest of the world. I pulled out more documents from my briefcase, maps, photographs, field reports. Let me tell you about my first real encounter, I said. August 1983. I'd been with Project Silverback for 3 years by then, mostly doing surveillance and data analysis. But that summer, I got assigned to a field team in the North Cascades of Washington. What was the objective? We'd been tracking a family group. We designated them Group 7 that had been spotted near the Ross Lake area. Local hikers had reported unusual sounds, large footprints, and a ranger had seen something moving through the forest that he couldn't identify. Our job was to locate the group, document their numbers and behavior, and ensure they weren't getting too close to populated areas. I slid a photograph across the table. It was grainy, taken with a telephoto lens, but clear enough. It showed a large, hair-covered figure standing near a tree line, approximately 8 feet tall. This was taken on August 18, 1983, I said. That's one of the adults from Group 7. We observed them for 11 days before they moved deeper into the wilderness. Morrison examined the photo carefully. This could be a person in a costume. That's what everyone says when they see these photos, I replied. But look at the proportions. The arm length, the shoulder width, the way it's standing. That's not human anatomy. Plus, we observed this individual for hours. We saw it climb trees, move through dense brush, interact with others of its kind. No costume would hold up to that kind of scrutiny. How close did you get? The closest I ever got was maybe 50 yards. We used standard surveillance techniques. Stayed downwind, moved quietly, used camouflage. But here's the thing, Morrison. They knew we were there. They always knew. They'd look right at our hiding positions, make vocalizations that seemed like warnings to each other. They tolerated our presence as long as we kept our distance. I pulled out another document, a field report with the CIA seal at the top. This is from September 1984. Group 7 had moved into an area near Highway 20. too close to human traffic. We got authorization to do what we called a soft push. Basically, we harassed them just enough to encourage them to move to a safer location. How do you harass a Bigfoot? Carefully, I said with a grim smile. We set up speakers playing human voices, left human scent markers around the perimeter of their territory, even had helicopters do low passes overhead. Nothing that would hurt them, just enough to make the area seem undesirable. Within a week, they'd relocated 15 miles north, back into deep wilderness. Morrison was writing rapidly. You said family group. How are they structured socially? Similar to gorillas, from what we observed, groups typically consist of one adult male, one or two adult females, and offspring of various ages. The adult male is usually between 7.5 to 8.5 feet tall. Females are slightly smaller, around 7 feet. Juveniles range from 4 to 6 feet, depending on age. And you said there are 17 groups? As of late 1993, yes, but that number fluctuates. Groups split up, individuals die, occasionally new groups form when juveniles mature and leave their family units. We've been maintaining a database of all known individuals since 1980. Each one gets a designation code, and we track them using a combination of satellite thermal imaging, ground surveillance, and reports from field agents. I showed him a map of the United States with marked locations. These are the primary territories. The highest concentration is in the Pacific Northwest, Washington, Oregon, Northern California. But we've also confirmed groups in the Northern Rocky Mountains, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, Northern Minnesota, and parts of the Appalachians from West Virginia up to Maine. What about other countries? Canada has their own monitoring program. We share some intelligence with the RCMP and Canadian Wildlife Service. They've identified at least a dozen groups in British Columbia and Alberta. There are also reports from Russia and the Himalayas, but that's outside our jurisdiction. Morrison looked up from his notes. You mentioned DNA analysis earlier. Can you elaborate on that? I pulled out another classified document, this one from a lab analysis conducted in 1985. This is a genetic analysis of hair samples collected from multiple individuals across different groups. The findings were remarkable. The DNA shows a close relationship to modern humans, closer than chimpanzees or gorillas, but with distinct differences. What kind of differences? Chromosomal variations that suggest a divergence from the human lineage somewhere between 100,000 and 500,000 years ago. The geneticists believe these creatures are either a subspecies of Homo sapiens or, more likely, a surviving population of an archaic human species we thought was extinct, possibly Homo heidelbergensis or a related lineage. So they're human? Biologically, they're human enough that there are serious ethical questions about how we treat them. But they're not Homo sapiens, they're something else. Something that evolved differently, adapted to a different ecological niche. They're stronger than us, more robust, better suited for life in harsh climates and difficult terrain. But they're also less technologically inclined. They don't make complex tools, don't use fire, don't have the same kind of abstract thinking we do. Do they have language? That's complicated, I said. They vocalize. We've recorded hundreds of hours of their sounds. There are patterns, structures that suggest communication, but whether it's language in the way we understand it, we can't say for certain. The linguists we consulted said it might be proto-language, something between animal communication and true human language. Morrison was quiet for a moment, processing everything. Derek, this is extraordinary, but it's also terrifying. If these creatures are this closely related to us, and the government has known about them for decades without telling anyone, it raises questions about what else they're hiding, I finished. That's part of why I'm coming forward. This isn't just about Bigfoot. It's about government transparency, about the public's right to know what's really out there. Tell me about the operational protocols. How does the CIA actually track these creatures day to day? I leaned back in the booth. We have three main methods: First is satellite surveillance. NSA has dedicated satellite time for thermal imaging of known territories. They can detect large heat signatures moving through areas where humans shouldn't be. When they get a hit, they alert our field teams. Second is ground surveillance. We maintain small teams of agents in field offices near major territories, 2 to 4 agents per location, rotating every 6 months. They monitor local reports, interview witnesses, do regular patrols of known habitat areas. Most of their work is just staying aware of where the creatures are and making sure they're not getting too close to populated areas. Third is what we call cooperative intelligence, information sharing with select individuals who have clearance. Certain Forest Service rangers, some state wildlife officials, even a few private citizens who live in remote areas and have had encounters. They report to us and we investigate. These private citizens, they know about the government operation? Not officially. We approach it as wildlife research. We tell them we're studying an unknown species, that their observations are valuable for conservation efforts. Most of them are just happy someone's taking their sightings seriously instead of calling them crazy. Morrison tapped his pen on his notepad. What about the physical evidence? You mentioned footprints, hair samples. Where does that go? There's a secure facility in Fort Detrick, Maryland. All physical evidence from Project Silverback is stored there. Plaster casts of hundreds of footprints, hair and tissue samples, even scat samples. There are also audio recordings, photographs, video footage. It's all classified, locked away where the public can't see it. Could you get access to any of that? Not anymore. I resigned in January. My clearance was revoked. But I kept copies of some documents like what I'm showing you now. And I know people who still work there who might be willing to help, off the record. This is incredibly risky for you, Morrison observed. I know, but Morrison, these creatures are in trouble. Their populations are declining. Every year their habitat gets smaller. Logging, development, climate change, it's all pushing them into corners. We estimate that at current rates of decline, they could be functionally extinct within 30 to 40 years, and the government is content to just monitor them while they disappear. Why not protect them? Establish preserves, breeding programs? Because that would require acknowledging they exist, and the government has decided that's not an option. There are economic considerations, logging interests, mining rights, land development. If we acknowledge these creatures exist and need protection, it would impact billions of dollars in natural resource extraction. So instead, we watch them die out slowly and keep the whole thing classified. I pulled out one final document, a population projection chart from 1992. This shows the projected population decline over the next 50 years if no intervention occurs. By 2040, we're looking at maybe 50 to 75 individuals total. By 2050, possibly extinct entirely. The government knows this, Morrison. They have the data, and they're choosing to do nothing. Morrison stared at the chart for a long moment. This is genocide by inaction. That's exactly what it is, and that's why I'm here, because someone needs to force the government's hand. Someone needs to make this public so there's pressure to actually protect these creatures instead of just watching them disappear. What do you think will happen when this story breaks? Honestly, chaos. The government will deny it, attack my credibility, maybe even charge me with espionage. Cryptozoologists will claim vindication. Scientists will demand access to the evidence. Hunters will flood into the forests trying to bag one. It's going to be a mess. But it's necessary? It's necessary, I confirmed. Because the alternative is watching an entire species, a species closely related to us, possibly the last surviving relatives of ancient humanity, go extinct while we pretend they don't exist. I can't live with that on my conscience anymore. Morrison glanced at his tape recorder to make sure it was still running. You mentioned earlier that you've had direct encounters. Tell me about the closest one, the one that convinced you beyond any doubt. I took a long drink of my now cold coffee, steeling myself. This was the part I'd never told anyone outside the agency, the part that still gave me nightmares. November 1986, Olympic National Forest. I was part of a 3-person team tracking Group 12, a family unit we'd been monitoring for about 8 months. The team leader was Agent Frank Holloway, a 15-year veteran. The other member was Dr. Patricia Chen, a zoologist from Stanford who was on loan to the project. What was the objective? We'd received reports from a logging camp about 15 miles from our last confirmed sighting of Group 12. Equipment going missing, strange sounds at night, enormous footprints around the perimeter. The logging company was getting nervous, and we needed to determine if it was our target group or something else. I pulled out a field report, this one marked with multiple classification stamps. We set up a surveillance camp about 2 miles from the logging site. Standard procedure: rotate watches, maintain radio silence except for scheduled check-ins, document everything we see. On the third night, around 2 a.m., I was on watch. Frank and Patricia were asleep in their tents. I heard something moving through the forest and something big trying to be quiet but not quite succeeding. I grabbed my night vision goggles and my camera. Morrison leaned forward. "What did you see?" "An adult male, approximately 8 feet tall, moving through the trees about 40 yards from our camp. It was heading toward us, but not directly. More like it was circling, investigating." I woke Frank immediately. We both watched it for about 10 minutes, taking photographs, documenting its movement patterns. Then it stopped, just froze in place maybe 25 yards away, and it looked directly at our position. Morrison, I swear to God it locked eyes with me through those night vision goggles. It knew exactly where we were. "What did you do?" Frank made the call to stay still, don't engage. Standard protocol for observation missions. So we just stayed there, watching it watch us. This went on for maybe 5 minutes, though it felt like an hour. Then the creature did something that changed everything. I paused, the memory as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. It raised its hand and made a gesture, not random, not threatening. It raised its hand, palm forward, like a greeting or maybe a warning. Then it pointed at our camp, then at itself, then made a pushing motion, like it was telling us to leave, that this was its territory. "You're saying it communicated with you?" "Deliberately and clearly. This wasn't an animal reacting on instinct. This was intelligent communication. Frank radioed for instructions, and we got orders to hold position. But the creature had other ideas. It started moving closer, slowly, deliberately. Frank got nervous, drew his sidearm. We were armed always, just in case. But the creature stopped when it saw the weapon. It made a low vocalization, not aggressive, more like concern. Then it did something that still gives me chills. What? It knelt down. This massive 8-foot creature knelt down, making itself smaller, less threatening. It placed both hands on the ground in front of it, in a position of submission or peace. Then it looked at us and made a sound, softer this time, almost questioning. Patricia woke up at this point, heard the commotion. When she saw what was happening, she did something against protocol. She stood up, stepped out from behind our cover, and walked toward the creature. Morrison's eyes widened. "That's insane." That's what Frank said, practically shouting at her to get back. But Patricia ignored him. She walked to within maybe 10 feet of the creature and sat down on the ground, mirroring its posture, making herself vulnerable, showing trust. The creature watched her, tilted its head. I swear it looked curious. Then it did something neither Frank nor I expected. It reached into the forest undergrowth and pulled out something, a handful of berries. It set them on the ground between itself and Patricia, then backed up slightly. "An offering," Morrison said. "Exactly." Patricia understood immediately. She pulled a granola bar from her pocket, unwrapped it, and placed it next to the berries. Then she backed up too. We all just sat there for a moment, this bizarre standoff in the middle of the forest at 2 in the morning. Then the creature picked up the granola bar, examined it, smelled it, and it ate it. It sat there, eating this granola bar, while Patricia ate some of the berries it had offered. They were just sharing food. Two intelligent beings from different species, communicating through the most basic form of social bonding. I showed Morrison a photograph from that night. It was grainy, taken with night vision, but it clearly showed the creatures sitting across from a human figure, both of them on the ground. This photo has been classified top secret for 8 years, I said. It's proof of intelligent interaction between humans and these creatures, and the government has kept it locked away. What happened next? The creature stayed for about 20 minutes. Patricia tried to communicate with it, showing it objects, making gestures. The creature responded, showed understanding. It pointed at things, made vocalizations that seemed to have meaning. Then it heard something we didn't. Its head jerked up, looking into the forest. It stood up quickly, made one last vocalization to Patricia, and disappeared into the darkness. Did you see it again? Not that trip, but we found evidence the next morning, footprints, places where it had been observing our camp, and this. I pulled out a photograph of a carefully arranged pile of stones. We found this about 50 yards from our camp, stones deliberately stacked in a pattern. Patricia believed it was a marker, a way of saying, "I was here," or marking territory. We found similar structures near other encounter sites. Morrison studied the photo. So they're creating structures? That's advanced behavior. That's what makes them so remarkable. They have tool use, social structures, apparent language, and now evidence of symbolic behavior, making markers, possibly even art. These are all indicators of human-level intelligence. After that incident, what did the agency do? They were furious with Patricia for breaking protocol, but they couldn't ignore what had happened. It became clear that these weren't just animals to be monitored. They were intelligent beings capable of peaceful interaction with humans. That changed the whole nature of the operation. How so? Before that, Project Silverback was purely observational. Track them, document them, make sure they stay away from humans. After November 1986, there was serious debate at the highest levels about whether we should attempt communication, establish diplomatic contact even. Did you? Not officially, but there were a few other incidents like mine, field agents having encounters where the creatures showed clear attempts at communication. Each time, we documented it, reported it up the chain. But the decision from above was always the same. Observe but don't engage. They were worried about the implications of official contact. What implications? Legal ones, mostly. If we officially acknowledge these creatures exist and are intelligent, what's their status? Do they have rights? Are they protected under some law? Could they make land claims? After all, their ancestors were here long before Europeans arrived. The lawyers went crazy with hypotheticals. So the decision was to just ignore them? Not ignore, to monitor. Continue the surveillance program, but don't acknowledge their intelligence. Don't engage in communication. Just watch them slowly decline toward extinction while we document every step. That's monstrous. That's government bureaucracy. Nobody wanted to be responsible for the can of worms that would open. So they kicked it down the road, classified everything, and hoped the problem would resolve itself. Resolve itself meaning wait for them to go extinct, then classify the entire project permanently. No creatures, no problem. No uncomfortable questions about why we hid them for so long. Morrison set down his pen, his expression troubled. Derek, if what you're telling me is true, this is bigger than Watergate. This is the government covering up the existence of an intelligent species. I know, that's why I'm here. Because in another decade or two, there won't be any evidence left, except classified files in a vault somewhere. These creatures will be gone, and most of humanity will never know they existed. What do you want to happen when this story publishes? I want congressional hearings. I want the classified files declassified. I want scientists who aren't bound by security clearances to study these creatures and develop real conservation plans. I want their habitat protected before it's too late. And you're willing to risk prison for that? I'm willing to risk anything for that, Morrison. I've spent 12 years lying to friends, family, the American people about what I really did for the CIA. I've watched these creatures through binoculars and night vision goggles, documented their decline, and done nothing meaningful to help them. I'm done being complicit. When I publish this, your life is going to change dramatically. I know. The agency will come after me. I'll probably be arrested. My reputation will be destroyed. But none of that matters if it means these creatures have a chance at survival. Morrison checked his tape recorder again. I'm going to need to corroborate all of this. Names of other operatives, access to more documentation, expert opinions on the evidence you're providing. I can give you 2 other names, agents who worked on Project Silverback and have since left the agency. They've agreed to speak with you confidentially, and I have more documents, more photographs. It's going to take time to go through everything. How much time do we have? The agency knows I copied files when I left. They're probably investigating internally right now, trying to figure out what I took and who I might talk to. We have maybe a few weeks before they move to stop this story from publishing. Then we'd better work fast. Morrison's pencil paused over the page. So you'd been planning to come forward since January? I nodded. Not planning. Hesitating. I didn't decide until late February. It took something big. What happened? The coffee shop seemed to shrink around us. A table of college kids laughed near the jukebox. Patsy Cline still spinning, like the place was frozen in time. I lowered my voice. Because in late '93, I said, the CIA slipped into new territory. They crossed a line we were never supposed to cross. Morrison leaned forward. I continued. December 1993. We received intel from a timber company near Mount St. Helens, remote area along Forest Road 25. A logging foreman called a Forest Service contact who was friendly to Silverback. He'd reported his crew hearing howls at night, finding stripped deer carcasses hung 8 or 9 feet up in trees. That behavior wasn't unusual for Group 7, who we'd tracked off and on since the early 80s. We thought they were long gone, but apparently they'd returned. And, Morrison asked, 2 weeks later, December 22nd, we got satellite thermal hits. 3 large warm signatures moving close to a remote operations shed. The shed housed small equipment, chainsaws, fuel, portable generators. At first, the assumption was they were just looking for heat or food, but then I exhaled slowly. One of the signatures went down. Morrison frowned. Went down how? Collapsed. The thermal image showed it slumping and going still. The other 2 signatures hovered around it for nearly 2 hours, then left the area. That wasn't normal. They don't abandon their injured unless something is really wrong. What did your team do? I was off rotation, but Holloway, Frank, was still running field ops. He assembled a 5-man team, including a medic familiar with Silverback protocols. Orders were simple: confirm condition, assess threat, attempt non-intrusive extraction only if necessary. They hiked in the next morning. I paused, scanning the cafe out of habit. Nobody was paying attention. When they arrived, I continued, they found blood, not human. Dark, thicker, tufts of hair along brush matched the chocolate brown adult male we believed was the group's alpha. Footprints, 14 inches long, wide, deep heel impressions. They tracked the injured individual about a quarter mile to a ravine. That's where they found it. Morrison swallowed. Still alive? Just barely. An adult male, about 8 feet tall, roughly 300 to 350 pounds. It had deep lacerations along the rib cage, some punctures, beeline punctures, narrow and deep. The medic thought it looked like an attack from a large predator, maybe a cougar, except cougars don't strike like that, not with precision. What did they do? They stabilized it, basic field dressing. It was conscious, barely. It tracked them with its eyes, tried to sit up but couldn't. Frank said it vocalized, low, rhythmic, not random. It tried to communicate. Morrison's pen scraped the page. And then? Then Frank made the call, that broke everything. I locked eyes with him. He ordered an extract. Morrison's expression sharpened. Wait, Silverback didn't have authority to capture one of these things. Right, I said. We'd been strictly forbidden, observe only, never capture, never contain. But Holloway radioed in, claiming urgent medical necessity. Clearance came back, verbal from a senior we didn't know, authorizing transport to a temporary medical site. Who gave that authorization? No idea. The name wasn't logged, no recording, only Frank heard it. I leaned back, feeling the old frustration simmer. The team sedated the creature, spent 3 hours carrying it across uneven ground to a logging access road. They loaded it in a modified transport van. Inside were restraints, pre-installed. That alone should have raised alarms. Someone had prepared for this. What then? Morrison asked. They brought it to a temporary facility near Packwood, a shipping container lab installed on private land, leased under a dummy corporation. They hooked it to IV fluids, ran basic vitals. For the first 48 hours, the creature was stable. Then the suits arrived. From the CIA? Not exactly. I looked down at my empty cup. They had Langley credentials, but they weren't from our division. No field history, no Silverback familiarity. They were escorted by 2 men who never gave names. DOD, most likely. I was called in 2 days later. By then, I continued, everything was different. Holloway wouldn't look me in the eye. The on-site medic, Rodriguez, kept saying the creature needed to be returned to the wild, that keeping it was torture. And the suits? Morrison asked quietly. They wanted samples, blood, tissue, repeatedly. Rodriguez pushed back, said it was too weak. They ignored him. They took blood, skin, then bone tissue. You're saying they were dissecting it alive? No, I said firmly. Not dissecting, sampling. But invasive sampling. It suffered. It vocalized during procedures, loud, distressed. Echoed through the metal walls. Morrison stared at me, horrified. This wasn't just research, I said. It felt like interrogation, testing responses, patterns. They played recorded vocalizations to it, Bigfoot recordings from other encounters. It would respond weakly, then stop. What happened to it? It died on the 4th night. I swallowed. I arrived the morning after. Rodriguez was gone, transferred without notice. The body was sealed in a transport crate. The suit said it was going to Fort Detrick. Truth? I shook my head. It never made it there. Or if it did, nobody at Detrick would acknowledge it. Every inquiry got stonewalled. Holloway told me to drop it. He said, I didn't want to know. And that was when you decided to leave? That was when the job became something else. We'd spent a decade working to protect these creatures, monitor, observe, discourage contact, but now someone had shifted the mission. They wanted physical control, biological material, maybe weaponization, who knows? I leaned forward. And here's the worst part. 3 days after the creature died, Group 7 disappeared from satellite imaging entirely, just gone, as if they were warned, or something drove them away. Or, Morrison whispered, eliminated. I didn't respond. He wiped his mouth, unsettled. This explains your urgency. I nodded. The agency crossed a threshold. Someone wanted leverage over these beings. If one capture turned into many, extinction would accelerate. And with the government denying everything, there'd be no oversight, no accountability. Morrison let out a shaky breath. So what now? We do what the agency wouldn't, I said. We tell the public, force transparency. If enough eyes are on this, they can't hide it. And maybe these creatures get a chance. Before Morrison could respond, the bell over the cafe door jingled. A man in a dark raincoat walked in, scanning the room like he didn't care who noticed. He wasn't dressed like a regular, clean haircut. Stillness in his posture, eyes too focused. My blood went cold. He wasn't here for coffee. I leaned across the booth and lowered my voice. We're out of time. The bell above Murphy's door stopped jingling, but the weight in the room didn't. The man in the dark raincoat shook the water off his shoulders, scanned the tables again, and took a seat at the counter without ordering. He didn't even pretend to look at a menu. I kept my tone steady. "Don't react. He's watching us." Morrison didn't turn, only lowered his gaze toward his notebook. "CIA," he whispered. "Maybe. Could be DOD. Could be nobody. But nobody walks into a Georgetown cafe at 9 a.m. wearing shoes that clean unless they want to be seen." I shifted slightly, positioning my body so I could watch the man in the chrome reflection of the napkin holder. He didn't talk. He didn't drink. He just watched. "We need to go," I said, keeping my voice level. "Right now, casually, separate exits." Morrison swallowed. "You said you expected them to come after you. I didn't think... I told you this wasn't a normal story." I slid out of the booth, dropping a few crumpled bills on the table. Morrison hesitated, packing the tape recorder into his coat. His hands were trembling. "Keep the documents hidden," I whispered. "Not on you. Not at home." He nodded. As I stood, the raincoat man lifted a coffee mug. Someone must have set it there without me noticing. He didn't drink it, just held it, waiting. I walked toward the restroom corridor. Morrison moved toward the front door. No one followed him. Inside the narrow hallway, I pushed through the back exit into a service alley. Cold March air hit my face. I didn't run, not yet. I walked to the corner and looked back. The raincoat man was gone, not outside, not in the alley, gone. I didn't go home. I didn't go to my hotel. I went straight to the one place I trusted, a storage unit in Arlington where I'd kept copies of files, maps, and a few undeveloped photographs from Silverback. I stayed there until evening. At 7:10 p.m., the landline phone mounted to the cinderblock wall rang. No one had the number. I didn't answer. It rang again. I picked up, a familiar voice. "You're moving too fast, Shepard." My throat tightened. I recognized him, Leland Shaw, former deputy director who'd oversaw several off-book programs in the late 80s. He'd never officially been tied to Silverback, yet somehow he always knew everything. "You need to stop," Shaw said calmly. "There are people who don't want the story out." "That's why it has to come out," I said. He sighed. "Derek, listen to me. You're making a mistake. You think you're doing the right thing, but you're not seeing the whole board. I saw enough." "You saw pieces. Pieces are dangerous." He paused. "That creature you recovered in '93? You think that was a rogue? You think it was wounded by chance?" My chest tightened. "What are you saying?" There were competing interests, groups inside and outside government who believed these beings shouldn't be allowed to roam uncontrolled. Some thought they represented an unknown national security threat. Others thought they were an opportunity. Biology, defense, anthropology, pick your field. Someone wants them. "You're justifying what happened." "No, I'm explaining it. Some of us wanted to keep them safe, study from a distance, leave them alone. Others wanted leverage, and right now, a beat. The wrong people are winning." I gripped the phone. "So help us." "I am," he said quietly. "I'm telling you to disappear. You can't win this fight. They'll bury the truth before you can publish. And they'll bury you too." "I'm already in too deep." "Then at least protect the others, the operatives who helped you, the journalist, everyone you've already involved." The line went silent for a moment. Then Shaw spoke again. "There are more of them, Derek. More than your data ever showed. They're not extinct, not yet. But if you push this, they will be." The phone clicked. He was gone. I stood there in the dim fluorescent light, staring at the silent receiver. Was that a threat? A warning? Both? I packed the remaining documents into a duffel, locked the unit, and slipped into the night. For 3 days, I vanished. Cheap motels, cash payments, no calls, no predictable movement. On the 4th day, Morrison contacted me through the coded message we'd arranged. A postcard, blank except for a time and an address. 9:30 p.m. Rock Creek Park. I arrived early. The park was silent except for distant traffic, wet leaves shining under street lamps. Morrison waited on a bench, coat pulled tight. He looked exhausted and afraid. "You talked to someone," he said. I nodded. So did I. He reached into his coat and handed me an envelope. Inside were photographs, black and white surveillance stills, a warehouse, cargo truck, men loading a long crate under floodlights. "Where did you get these?" I asked. "A source, someone inside Fort Detrick. They said the crate from Packwood never entered the main facility. It was rerouted to a private contractor in Virginia." I exhaled. "Then the samples." "Gone," he said. "And the body?" He shook his head. "No record, no archive number, nothing." I stared at the photos. One still showed two men standing by the crate. Their silhouettes weren't visible clearly, but one gesture was unmistakable. One of them looked like he was checking for a pulse on something inside. "That was taken 3 weeks ago," Morrison said, "meaning whatever's in there isn't dead." The air thinned. "That's not possible," I whispered. "I thought you should see it before we publish." "Publish?" I turned to him. "After this, you still want to?" "Yes, and I'm going to, with or without you." I admired the conviction, feared it too. "We have enough to go public," he said. "Documents, photographs, maps, witnesses. We publish, then we deal with the fallout." The wind kicked up, scattering leaves across the path. "What about Shaw?" I asked. "He thinks revealing this kills them." Morrison looked at me. "Or protects them. Sunlight is the only defense against people who operate in darkness." A branch snapped somewhere in the woods. Both of us froze. Then a sound. Not a roar, not a growl. A low, resonant call, almost conversational. It carried through the trees with an eerie calm, neither hostile nor urgent. I'd heard that call before. In 1986, 8 pays, Ponstook, 4 fures of presence, just beyond the tree line. Morrison's eyes widened. He whispered, "Is that?" "Yes." Another call answered from deeper in the woods. Then silence. I kept my voice low. "They've been following us, maybe watching. They know something's happening. Maybe they know we're telling their story." Morrison looked around, unsettled. "What do we do?" I took a breath. "We finish what we started." I walked away from the sound, deeper, onto the lit path. Morrison followed. "You're going to publish," I said, "but carefully. We protect their habitats. We don't reveal coordinates. We release enough to prove they exist, nothing that helps hunters or contractors." "And if the government retaliates?" "They will," I said. "But once the truth is public, they can't erase it." We reached the parking area. Morrison paused. "What happens to you?" I shrugged. "Maybe I get arrested. Maybe I disappear. But it doesn't matter. Once the public knows, nothing goes back in the box." He nodded slowly. "We'll go to press Monday. If you need a safe place—" "I won't," I said. "I've lived in shadows long enough." We exchanged a final look. Respect, fear, purpose. Then we went separate ways. As I walked to my car, another soft call echoed from the woods. The same deliberate tone, watching, waiting. I didn't look back. Somewhere out there, an ancient people, 8 pays, por 204 mir tall, was deciding whether to trust humanity one last time, and I was praying we wouldn't blow it.